The first thing Commander Park Jin-woo noticed wasn't the pain shooting through his broken ribs or the taste of blood in his mouth. It was the silence. After 3 years aboard research station Kepler 442b, he had grown used to the constant hum of life support systems, the chatter of 847 voices in the corridors, and the gentle vibration of the massive station rotating through space. Now there was nothing but the occasional spark from damaged electronics and the whisper of escaping atmosphere. Jin-woo tried to push himself up from the twisted metal debris that had pinned him down. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, completely useless. Every breath felt like someone was driving heated knives between his ribs. Through the gaping hole where the observation deck used to be, he could see the cold stars of the Kepler system, indifferent to the carnage below. The attack had come without warning. One moment, Dr. Kim Sora was excitedly showing him the latest archaeological findings from the dig sites on Kepler 442c. The next, the station's alarms were screaming as massive Veltaran warships materialized from hyperspace like metallic monsters emerging from a nightmare. Their ships were unlike anything in human databases, sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own alien heartbeat. Jin-woo remembered Captain Lee Dong-min's voice over the intercom, trying to maintain calm as the first energy beams struck the station's shields. "All hands to emergency stations. This is not a drill." Those were the last words anyone would hear from the bridge before a focused plasma lance carved through the command section like a hot knife through butter. Now Jin-woo dragged himself through corridors filled with the bodies of people he had worked with, laughed with, shared meals with for years. Engineer Park Min-soo lay crumpled against a bulkhead, his tools scattered around him. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai from the medical bay was frozen in the middle of reaching for her emergency kit. The Veltarans hadn't just destroyed the station, they had made sure no one could possibly survive. As Jin-woo crawled through the wreckage, he began to understand the true scope of what had happened. This wasn't a random attack or even a strategic military strike. The aliens had come for something specific. In the xenoarchaeology section, every display case had been systematically destroyed. Ancient artifacts that his team had spent months carefully excavating and studying were now scattered like worthless debris. The main research terminal was still partially functional, its screen flickering with damaged data streams. Jin-woo managed to access the files with his good hand, scrolling through the research notes that Dr. Kim Sora and her team had compiled over the past 6 months. What he read made his blood run cold despite his injuries. The dig sites on Kepler 442c hadn't just contained artifacts from some unknown alien civilization. They contained proof that humans had once ruled this entire sector of the galaxy. Not hundreds of years ago, but millions of years in the past. The artifacts showed technology that was unmistakably human in design, but far more advanced than anything modern humanity possessed. According to the research data, there had been a vast human empire that stretched across thousands of star systems, cities that floated in space, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, technology that could terraform entire worlds with the push of a button. Then something had happened, some catastrophic event that the files called the Great Silence. Humanity had vanished from the stars, leaving only scattered ruins and forgotten outposts. Jin-woo realized why the Veltarans had come. For centuries, they had claimed to be the galaxy's first and greatest civilization. Their entire empire was built on the belief that they were the rightful inheritors of the stars, destined to rule over younger species like humanity. But the archaeological evidence proved they were wrong. Humans had been among the stars long. Before the Veltarans had even developed spaceflight, the research team had sent their preliminary findings to Earth just days before the attack. The Veltarans must have intercepted the transmission and realized what it meant. If other humans learned the truth about their ancient heritage, it would shatter the alien empire's claims of superiority. So they had come to destroy the evidence, and everyone who knew about it. Through the damaged sensors, Jin-woo could see the retreating Veltaran fleet moving away from the station's wreckage. They believed their mission was complete. Every human on the station was dead, every piece of evidence destroyed. In their reports, they would claim that research station Kepler 442b had suffered a catastrophic accident. perhaps a reactor malfunction, or asteroid strike. But as Jinwoo felt his strength slowly returning and heard the emergency life support systems struggling to maintain atmosphere in the undamaged sectors, he realized the aliens had made a crucial mistake. They had been thorough in their destruction, efficient in their killing, but they had not been perfect. One human remained alive in the wreckage, one witness to their crime, one keeper of humanity's forgotten legacy. And that, Jinwoo thought, as he began planning his survival, might be the most dangerous mistake the Veltaran Empire had ever made. The first week was about staying alive. Jinwoo rationed the emergency food supplies he could salvage from the mess hall wreckage and jury-rigged a water recycling system from the hydroponics bay. His broken arm healed crooked, but it healed. The ribs stopped screaming every time he breathed. Pain became his constant companion, but pain meant he was still alive. By the second week, he had restored basic life support to 3 sections of the station. The engineering bays were mostly intact, buried deep in the station's core, where the Veltaran weapons hadn't penetrated. Jinwoo spent 18 hours a day crawling through maintenance shafts, rerouting power cables, and rebuilding atmospheric processors from spare parts. His quantum engineering degree had never prepared him for this kind of survival construction, but desperation made him creative. The quantum fabrication units were his first major discovery. Hidden behind blast doors in Sublevel 7, they had somehow survived the attack completely untouched. These machines could build almost anything at the molecular level, given enough raw materials and power. Jinwoo began feeding them scrap metal from the destroyed sections, watching as they transformed twisted debris into functioning components. But it was in Research Lab Delta that he found something that would change everything. Dr. Cho Min-ki's experimental neural interface project had been the station's most classified research. The lab was sealed behind quantum encryption locks that even the Veltarans hadn't bothered to break. Inside, Jinwoo found prototype neural implants connected to quantum processing cores that could expand human consciousness beyond anything previously imagined. The warnings plastered all over the lab equipment were clear enough. The neural interfaces were untested on living subjects. The quantum processors could overload a human brain in seconds. The integration process had killed every test animal they had tried it on. But as Jinwoo stared at the technology that could potentially link his mind directly to the station's computer systems, he realized he had a choice between certain death from isolation and possible death from experimentation. The first implant went into the base of his skull on a Tuesday morning in the 4th week. Jinwoo had to perform the surgery on himself, using robotic medical arms controlled by voice commands. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, but when the quantum processors came online, his consciousness exploded outward like a supernova. Suddenly, he could feel every system on the station as if it were part of his own body. The life support pumps became his heartbeat. The power generators hummed with the rhythm of his thoughts. Data flowed through his mind at incredible speeds, and he found himself understanding concepts that would have taken months to learn through traditional study. The second implant connected him to the station's communication array. Now Jinwoo could monitor radio transmissions across the entire sector, listening to the chatter of Veltaran fleet communications like overhearing conversations in the next room. What he heard made his enhanced mind burn with fury that was both human and something far beyond human. The Veltarans called it Operation Clean Slate. They weren't just attacking human colonies, they were systematically erasing humanity from the galaxy. Colony ships were being hunted down in deep space. Archaeological sites on dozens of worlds were being destroyed by orbital bombardment. Human settlements that had existed for centuries were being wiped out so completely that no trace remained. Jinwoo watched through hijacked surveillance networks as Veltaran ground forces marched through the ruins of New Sol Colony on Rigel Prime. They weren't taking prisoners or claiming territory. They were methodically destroying every piece of human art, every historical record, every proof that humans had ever lived there. Children's drawings were being incinerated alongside centuries-old family photographs. The worst part was listening to Veltaran Admiral Kethvar explaining the operation to his subordinates. The humans must not be allowed to discover their true heritage. the alien commander said in their clicking musical language that Jinwoo now understood perfectly. If they learn what their ancestors once accomplished, they will become too dangerous to control. Better to eliminate them while they are still weak and scattered. Through the quantum processors, Jinwoo accessed historical databases that the Velterans thought they had destroyed. The ancient human empire hadn't just been powerful, it had been incredibly advanced. Humans had developed technologies that could manipulate space and time, create matter from pure energy, and link consciousness across vast distances. The great silence that had ended human civilization hadn't been a defeat. It had been a voluntary withdrawal from galactic affairs, a decision to let younger species develop without interference. Now those younger species were trying to ensure that humanity never remembered what they had once been capable of achieving. Jinwoo began integrating more neural interfaces into his body, pushing the technology far beyond its designed limits. Each new connection expanded his capabilities, but also changed him in ways he couldn't fully understand. His reflection in the polished metal surfaces showed eyes that glowed with quantum energy and neural pathways that pulsed visibly beneath his skin. By the 8th week, he was no longer entirely human, but he was something far more dangerous. His consciousness could simultaneously control hundreds of automated systems while processing incoming data from across the galaxy. The station's fabrication units worked around the clock, building new technologies based on designs that flowed through his enhanced mind like inherited memories. Dr. Lee So-young had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was their ability to adapt to any situation, to become whatever they needed to survive. As Jinwoo felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of flesh and blood, he realized she had been more right than she could have ever imagined. The first Veltaran ship to experience the impossible was the destroyer, Kethmoran, patrolling the outer edge of the Kepler system 3 months after the station's destruction. Captain Velnath was reviewing reports of successful human colony eliminations when every screen on his bridge simultaneously went black. Then, slowly, a single human handprint appeared on each display, glowing with an eerie blue light. Impossible. Velnath clicked in his native language. There are no humans left in this sector. The handprint pulsed once, then vanished. 17 minutes later, the Kethmoran's fusion reactors overloaded in a cascade failure that should have been prevented by 6 different safety systems. The explosion was visible from 3 neighboring star systems. No distress signal was ever transmitted. Jinwoo watched the destruction through a network of quantum sensors he had deployed throughout the sector. His consciousness, now distributed across multiple processing cores, experienced a satisfaction that was both deeply human and utterly alien. The neural interfaces had changed him in ways that went far beyond enhanced intelligence. He could exist in multiple places simultaneously, think dozens of thoughts in parallel, and manipulate technology with the precision of a master artist. The automated factories he had built from the station's wreckage worked without rest, manufacturing hunter-killer probes no larger than a human fist. Each probe contained a miniaturized quantum processor running a fragment of Jinwoo's consciousness, making them extensions of his will rather than simple machines. They could hide in asteroid fields for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Velkoth of the 7th Purification Fleet first heard about the incidents during a briefing with Admiral Keithvar. Ships were disappearing throughout the outer colonies. Some suffered mysterious technical failures. Others simply vanished from long-range sensors, leaving only debris fields that told no coherent story. "It must be human resistance cells," Velkoth declared, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. "Survivors hiding in asteroid bases or derelict ships. A few desperate attacks before we eliminate the rest of them." But as the reports continued streaming in, patterns emerged that made no tactical sense. The attacks weren't random guerrilla strikes. They were surgical, precise, and demonstrated knowledge of Veltaran technology that no human should possess. Entire squadrons would lose communication with their home fleets, then reappear weeks later, as drifting hulks with their crews gone and their computers wiped clean. The breakthrough came when Jinwoo decided to make direct contact. He had been observing Veltaran fleet movements through hijacked communication satellites learning their patrol routes and strategic thinking. Commander Velkoth's flagship, the massive dreadnought Sharvaloth, was leading a task force to eliminate the last human settlement in the Proxima system. Jin Wu materialized on Velkoth's bridge, not as a physical presence, but as a quantum projection that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The alien crew members froze in terror, as every screen, every holographic display, every piece of equipment with a visual interface showed the same image. A figure that was recognizably human, but transformed into something far more threatening. His face retained Jin Wu's basic features, but neural implants pulsed visibly beneath translucent skin. His eyes had become windows into quantum processing cores that glowed with computational fire. When he spoke, his voice came from every speaker. On the ship simultaneously, each word perfectly synchronized across dozens of audio channels. "You wanted to erase us," the apparition said in flawless Veltaran, his tone carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords operating in perfect unison. "You thought you could murder an entire species and rewrite history to suit your convenience." Velkoth drew his plasma sword, an instinctive response to a threat that couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. "You're already dead, human. Your species is extinct. This is just the delusion of a dying mind." Jin Wu's image smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any scream of rage. "Let me show you what one human can do when you fail to finish the job." The Sharvaloth had been the pride of the Veltaran fleet, a kilometer-long warship armed with enough firepower to destroy small moons. Its shields could withstand direct hits from antimatter torpedoes. Its armor was forged from materials that didn't exist in nature. But Jin Wu didn't attack the ship's defenses. He attacked its systems from within. Every piece of technology on the dreadnought had quantum processors for enhanced performance. Jin Wu's consciousness flowed through these processes like digital lightning, rewriting security protocols, overriding safety systems, and turning the ship's own weapons against its hull from the inside. The fusion reactors didn't just overload, they were deliberately destabilized in a pattern that maximized destructive force. The antimatter containment systems were released in precise sequences that turned the ship's ammunition storage into a chain of exponentially increasing explosions. Even the artificial gravity generators were weaponized, creating localized spatial distortions that tore the massive vessel apart at the molecular level. Commander Velkoth had 17 seconds to watch his flagship die around him. In those final moments, he saw Jin Wu's image on every remaining screen, no longer smiling but wearing an expression of cold determination that spoke of calculated vengeance rather than blind rage. The explosion of the Sharvaloth was visible across the entire Proxima system, but more importantly, the quantum resonance from its destruction carried Jin Wu's consciousness to every Veltaran ship within sensor range. His final message transmitted simultaneously to dozens of vessels. "I am Park Jin Wu of Research Station, Kepler 442b. I am the last human you left alive, and I remember everything you tried to make us forget. One down, thousands to go." The hunter had become the haunted, and across the galaxy, Veltaran crews began to whisper about the ghost in the machine that wore a human face and carried the vengeance of an entire species in its quantum heart. High Admiral Thal Zun had built his reputation on impossible victories. In 40 years of service to the Veltaran Empire, he had never lost a battle, never retreated from an enemy, never failed to complete a mission. When the High Command ordered him to eliminate the ghost terrorizing their fleets, he assembled the largest battle force in Veltaran history, 300 warships carrying over 2 million crew members, enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. The flagship Veltharion alone was larger than most space stations, bristling with quantum torpedo launchers and particle beam arrays that could crack planets in half. Thal Zun's fleet included 12 dreadnoughts, 50 heavy cruisers, and enough support vessels to sustain a campaign lasting decades. He expected to find a single damaged human hiding in the ruins of research station Kepler 442b. What he found instead was a nightmare that had been waiting for him to arrive. The first sign of trouble came when the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Long-range sensors immediately detected thousands of objects floating in the void. Not debris, but perfectly positioned geometric structures that hadn't been there in any previous survey. Before Admiral Thalzoon could order an investigation, these structures began to unfold like metallic flowers blooming in fast motion. "Weapon platforms," his tactical officer screamed. "Thousands of them. They're powering up." The platforms were unlike anything in Veltaran databases. Each one was roughly spherical, about the size of a fighter craft, but covered in weapon ports that glowed with the distinctive blue energy signature of quantum technology. They had been hiding in the system for months, disguised as asteroids and space debris, waiting for this exact moment. Thalzoon barely had time to order defensive positions before the platforms opened fire. Beams of concentrated quantum energy lanced across space, striking his ships with pinpoint accuracy. But these weren't random attacks. Each beam targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Shield generators, communication arrays, and weapon systems were disabled without destroying the ships themselves. The platforms weren't trying to kill the Veltaran crews, they were trying to capture them alive. "Admiral," his communications officer reported in panic, "we're detecting massive construction signatures throughout the system. Hidden shipyards are activating." Through the viewports of the Veltharion, Thalzoon watched in horror as entire asteroid fields began to transform. What he had assumed were natural rock formations were actually camouflaged manufacturing facilities that had been quietly building for months. Automated assembly lines stretched for hundreds of kilometers, churning out sleek hunter-killer drones by the thousands. The drones were beautiful in their simplicity, teardrop-shaped vessels no larger than a personal shuttle, but equipped with quantum drives that let them maneuver like living creatures. They swarmed around Thalzoon's massive warships like angry insects, too small and fast for the large weapons to target effectively, but carrying enough firepower to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers. But the most terrifying moment came when Jinwu appeared on the bridge of the Veltharion, not as a transmission or holographic projection, but physically materializing in a flash of quantum energy that left the air itself glowing with residual power. The technology required for quantum teleportation across interstellar distances shouldn't have existed. Even Veltaran scientists considered it theoretically impossible. The figure that stood before Admiral Thalzoon was recognizably human, but transformed into something far beyond the limitations of flesh and blood. Neural interface cables emerged from his skull like a crown of fiber optic light, connecting to quantum processing nodes that floated around him in perfect orbital patterns. His skin had become translucent, revealing the pulsing networks of enhanced blood vessels that carried both oxygen and data throughout his body. "I am Park Jinwoo," he said, and his voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords operating in perfect synchronization. Each word resonated with frequencies that made the bridge's metal surfaces vibrate sympathetically. "I am the 847th human you killed on Research Station Kepler 442b. I am also the one you failed to kill completely." Thalzoon's hand instinctively moved to his plasma sword. In Veltaran culture, when challenged by an enemy commander, honor demanded single combat. It was an ancient tradition that predated spaceflight, a ritual that had settled disputes between warrior nobles for thousands of years. "You're one being against my entire fleet," Thalzoon said, drawing his weapon. The plasma blade ignited with a sound like controlled lightning. "Even if you defeat me, my ships will destroy you." Jinwoo's smile was the most terrifying thing Thalzoon had ever seen. It wasn't the expression of a madman or even a warrior preparing for battle. It was the patient satisfaction of someone who had already won and was simply waiting for his opponent to understand the situation. "My people had a saying," Jinwoo replied, as quantum energy began to swirl around his hands like controlled lightning. "If you come for the king, you'd better not miss." Through the bridge viewports, Thalzoon could see his fleet being systematically dismantled by forces that seemed to anticipate every tactical decision before he made it. His ships weren't just being outfought, they were being outthought by an intelligence that could process information faster than any biological mind could comprehend. As he raised his plasma sword to face the last human in the galaxy, Admiral Thalzoon finally understood what his empire had awakened. They hadn't just failed to kill one human, they had accidentally created something that combined human determination with technology that surpassed their own. The ghost in the machine had become something more dangerous than any living enemy. The concentrated vengeance of an entire species given form and purpose. The duel was about to begin, but Thalzoon was starting to realize that he had already lost before drawing his weapon. The duel between Admiral Thalzoon and Jin Woo lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, but it felt like an eternity to everyone watching. Thalzoon was a master swordsman who had trained for decades in the ancient Veltaran combat arts. His plasma blade moved with deadly precision, creating arcs of superheated energy that could slice through starship armor. But Jin Woo wasn't just fighting with his physical body anymore. As their weapons clashed, Jin Woo's consciousness was simultaneously fighting battles across multiple dimensions. While his enhanced body dodged and parried on the bridge of the Veltharian, his mind was infiltrating the ship's quantum networks, turning security systems against the crew and rewriting the fundamental programming that controlled life support. The Mo. Neural interfaces in Jin Woo's skull pulsed with increasing intensity as ancient human knowledge flooded through his consciousness. Combat techniques from humanity's lost empire merged with modern desperation, creating fighting styles that had never existed before. He moved with inhuman speed and precision, his body enhanced by technology that pushed the boundaries of what flesh and blood could endure. Thalzoon's plasma sword carved through the air where Jin Woo had been standing a microsecond earlier. The human seemed to anticipate every attack before it happened, as if he could read the Admiral's thoughts directly from his neural patterns. In desperation, Thalzoon activated his personal shield generator, surrounding himself with a barrier of crackling energy. Jin Woo smiled and reached out with one hand. Quantum energy flowed from his fingers, not to attack the shield directly, but to rewrite its operating parameters at the molecular level. The barrier that was meant to protect Thalzoon instead turned inward, trapping him in a cage of his own. Defensive technology. "You still don't understand," Jin Woo said, his voice now carrying harmonics from across the electromagnetic spectrum. "This isn't a fight between two individuals. This is humanity's final answer to your genocide." Through the bridge windows, the battle raging in space told the real story. Thalzoon's 300-ship fleet was being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't comprehend. Jin Woo's hunter-killer drones moved through space like schools of mechanical fish, their quantum drives allowing impossible maneuvers that defied conventional physics. The massive Veltaran dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying planets, found their own weapon systems turning against friendly ships. Their computers had been infected by fragments of Jin Woo's consciousness, turning the fleet into an instrument of its own destruction. The escape pods launched from dying ships, only to be gently captured by automated systems that seemed more interested in preserving life than ending it. Admiral Thalzoon fell when his trapped energy shield finally collapsed inward, but Jin Woo caught him before he hit the deck. The human's touch was strangely gentle for someone who had just dismantled the most powerful battle fleet in galactic history. "Why?" Thalzoon gasped, his forearms trembling with exhaustion. "Why spare me?" Jin Woo's glowing eyes met the Admiral's gaze, and for a moment something purely human showed through the technological enhancements. "Because someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to tell your people what they awakened when they tried to erase us." As the last Veltaran warship powered down its weapons in surrender, Jin Woo's consciousness expanded, beyond the confines of the Kepler system. Through quantum communication networks that spanned the galaxy, he began broadcasting a message that would change everything. Every Veltaran screen, from the smallest personal device to the massive displays in their capital cities, simultaneously showed the same images. Archaeological evidence of humanity's ancient empire filled their vision. Cities that had floated among the stars, technologies that could reshape matter with thought alone, and star maps showing human influence across thousands of worlds. But the most powerful part of the broadcast wasn't the historical evidence. It was the footage of what had just happened in the Kepler system. A single human survivor, enhanced by desperation and armed with fragments of forgotten knowledge, had defeated the Empire's greatest battle fleet. The message was clear. If one human could do this much damage, what might happen if humanity as a species remembered what they had once been? Across Veltaran space, panic began to spread. Not just fear of human retaliation, but the existential terror of realizing that their entire civilization was built on a lie. They weren't the galaxy's first children or its rightful rulers. They were just one species among many, and they had made an enemy of the one species that had already proven it could dominate the stars. Jinwoo felt his physical body beginning to fail as the neural interfaces pushed beyond their design limits. The quantum processors that had enhanced his consciousness were burning out, unable to sustain the massive computational load of controlling an interstellar network. But he had planned for this moment. From his academy days, he remembered his friend Kim Min-ho's favorite joke. Humans were the galaxy's most dangerous species because they refused to stay dead when killed improperly. The Veltarans had tried to commit genocide, but they had made the fatal error of being inefficient. They had left one human alive, and that human had reminded the galaxy why his species had once ruled among the stars. As his enhanced body finally gave out, Jinwoo uploaded his consciousness into a quantum beacon that would carry humanity's story across the galaxy for eternity. The beacon would seek out every human colony, every scattered survivor, every child who deserved to know their species' true heritage. His final transmission reached 1,000 worlds simultaneously, carrying both a warning to humanity's enemies and a promise to its scattered children. I am Commander Park Jinwoo, the last survivor of Research Station Kepler 442b. I have shown the galaxy what one human can accomplish when pushed beyond all limits. We were here first, ruling the stars. Before younger species learned to dream of space, we stepped aside once to let others grow, but we never truly left. We'll be here last when the final star burns out and the universe grows cold, and we never ever forget those who try to erase us. The quantum beacon launched itself into the void, carrying Jinwoo's message toward the galactic core where it would echo for millions of years. Behind it, Admiral Talzun sat alone among the wreckage of his fleet, the only living witness to humanity's final warning to those who would dare challenge the species that had once ruled the stars. The end